How did a known predator get outsmarted by an 8-year-old? Imagine waking up to find your entire family had been attacked, your parents and brother gone, and you, just 8 years old, taken by a ruthless, dangerous man. Even more horrifying is that the authorities knew exactly how dangerous this man was, yet he was allowed to roam free. In the quiet rural community of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, the Groene family lived what appeared to be a peaceful, modest life. Brenda Groene was a devoted mother, known for her warmth and love for music, always eager to ensure meals were on the table for her children and her boyfriend, Mark Mackenzie. Her kids, Slade, Dylan, and Shasta, were close-knit, enjoying simple pleasures like camping trips and playing outside in the Idaho countryside. But on the night of May 16, 2005, this idyllic picture was shattered in an unthinkable act. Brenda, Mark, and 13-year-old Slade lost their lives in their own home, and the youngest children, Shasta and Dylan, vanished, taken by a man who had been lurking unseen, patiently watching their lives unfold from the shadows. This tragedy immediately raised a critical question. How could someone so dangerous, so clearly identified as a threat by multiple evaluations, be free to commit such crimes? Joseph Edward Duncan was not an unknown entity. His dark history stretched back decades, marked by chilling red flags repeatedly ignored or mishandled by the various systems meant to protect society. In this video, we'll closely examine the unsettling systematic failures that allowed a known predator to slip through the cracks of justice. And we'll also explore the astonishing psychological resilience displayed by Shasta Groene, an 8-year-old child who, against all odds, used extraordinary tactics to survive and bring her captor to justice. Joseph Edward Duncan's story began long before the night he shattered the Groene family's world. Born on February 25, 1963, in Tacoma, Washington, Duncan's childhood was marked by instability, frequently moving due to his father's military service. After his parents divorced, Duncan stayed with his mother, a domineering presence in his life according to later psychological assessments. By age 15, Duncan had already committed his first documented serious crime, involving causing harm to a younger child in 1978. From there, his dangerous behavior escalated rapidly. By age 16, during his confinement at the Jesse Dislin Boys Ranch, Duncan admitted to therapists that he had harmed multiple other children. In 1980, at just 17, he abducted and harmed another teenager. During this time, psychological evaluations clearly identified Duncan as extremely dangerous, explicitly stating that he was not safe to be at large. Despite this alarming diagnosis and clear warnings from mental health professionals, Duncan was released on parole in 1994 after serving only 14 years of a 20-year sentence. The decision to release Duncan early, despite evidence indicating a 90% likelihood that he would reoffend, represents a chilling institutional failure. Authorities had all the information needed to prevent further tragedy, yet Duncan was allowed back into society without sufficient monitoring or oversight. Tragically, this decision would not haunt only the Groene family, but also many others whose lives were forever changed by Duncan's unchecked predatory behavior. After his release in 1994, Joseph Duncan's criminal behavior escalated with devastating consequences. Despite the clear dangers he posed, Duncan managed to evade significant oversight, repeatedly slipping through the cracks of an ineffective monitoring system. In 1996, while on parole, Duncan violated terms by using drugs and possessing a firearm, yet only served a minor 30-day sentence, a mere slap on the wrist considering his history. Tragically, Duncan had already begun committing even more heinous crimes during this period. crimes that remained unsolved for years due to alarming investigative oversights. In 1996, just after a parole violation, Duncan took the lives of 2 young sisters in Seattle, Washington. Despite evidence linking him to the region and to similar behaviors, authorities failed to connect Duncan to these crimes at the time. 1 year later, in 1997, Duncan took young boy Anthony Martinez in California, leading to the boy losing his life. Despite clear evidence and a consistent pattern of behavior, Duncan's involvement remained undiscovered for almost 10 years. DNA evidence was later used to prove Duncan's responsibility, but this was only after Shasta Groene courageously shared details Duncan had told her during her time in captivity. Throughout this grim escalation, Duncan's parole oversight continued to fail spectacularly. Authorities were aware of his dangerous potential, yet he was permitted to live largely unchecked, allowed to cross state lines without sufficient monitoring. The systematic failures that allowed Joseph Duncan to remain free and undetected were glaringly evident, highlighting a disturbing reality. The criminal justice system had multiple opportunities to prevent further tragedy, but failed to act decisively and protect the public. In the early 2000s, Joseph Duncan's behavior became increasingly brazen. In 2004, he was arrested for causing harm to 2 young boys at a playground in Minnesota, a crime that finally placed him back on law enforcement radar. Despite his alarming history and clear risk to public safety, Duncan was released on bail, a decision made possible by a Minnesota businessman who posted his $15,000 bail. Almost immediately, Duncan fled the state, becoming a fugitive whose whereabouts were alarmingly unknown. This pivotal failure can be traced to inadequate communication between state agencies and fragmented data systems that made tracking offenders across state lines virtually impossible. Duncan was a known predator, yet the justice system allowed him to vanish without an effective mechanism to track his movements. Authorities in different states failed to share critical information or connect crucial dots, leaving communities vulnerable and unaware. Compounding this breakdown was law enforcement's lack of awareness about Duncan's meticulous techniques. Duncan had developed sophisticated methods of surveillance, often using GPS technology to mark locations where potential victims lived. Despite his extensive criminal history, authorities failed to recognize these patterns or proactively intervene. On the night of May 16, 2005, Duncan executed the horrific act he had meticulously planned. He entered the Groene family home, tragically taking the lives of Brenda Groene, Mark Mackenzie, and young Slade Groene. Amidst the chaos and terror of that night, Duncan had taken the 2 youngest children, Shasta and Dylan, spiriting them away to remote locations. In the weeks following, Shasta and Dylan faced unimaginable hardships as they were moved between isolated campsites. Duncan attempted to gain control by instilling fear, telling the children unsettling stories about his past actions, believing they would not remember. Throughout this time, Shasta remained quietly observant, listening carefully and memorizing crucial details Duncan unknowingly revealed. Despite the unimaginable horror she faced, Shasta Groene, only 8 years old, displayed astonishing bravery and resilience. Quickly sensing her captor's psychological vulnerabilities, Shasta embarked on an extraordinary mental battle for survival. She instinctively understood that Duncan was seeking some form of twisted emotional connection, and she skillfully used this to her advantage. Psychologists studying survival cases highlight methods similar to those Shasta used: feigning affection, carefully engaging in conversation about Duncan's personal life, and providing emotional reassurance. These strategies, according to experts, can create a sense of empathy or connection in captors, reducing the likelihood of further harm and creating potential opportunities for escape. Shasta's emotional intelligence and courage proved remarkably effective. She convinced Duncan she cared for him, subtly guiding him back toward populated areas. Shasta's brave actions ultimately paved the way for her rescue, bringing a chilling chapter to a close and underscoring the astonishing resilience of the human spirit under the most harrowing circumstances. On July 2, 2005, nearly 7 weeks after the initial horror, Joseph Duncan made the critical mistake that would lead to his downfall. After Shasta convinced him she wanted to introduce him to important places from her past, Duncan took her back into the very town from which she had been taken. They entered a Denny's restaurant in Coeur d'Alene, unaware that this would become the stage for Shasta's courageous final act of survival. Inside the restaurant, waitress Amber Dean immediately recognized Shasta from the widespread missing person posters. Carefully observing the unsettling interaction between Shasta and Duncan, Amber subtly alerted the manager and authorities while other patrons positioned themselves to prevent Duncan's escape. Shasta, employing the emotional manipulation strategies she had refined during her captivity, managed to remain calm and compliant, ensuring Duncan did not suspect her awareness of the unfolding rescue. When police finally arrived, they approached the table and asked Shasta to identify herself. Calmly and clearly, she gave her name, instantly changing the mood of the restaurant from tense anxiety to relief. Duncan was swiftly arrested, his capture met with applause from patrons deeply moved by the bravery of the young girl who had endured so much. Duncan was eventually convicted and sentenced for multiple crimes, receiving multiple life sentences as well as a federal death sentence. Though his eventual death in prison in 2021 brought some closure, the trauma he inflicted on Shasta would linger far longer. Following her difficult experience, Shasta encountered substantial emotional difficulties, including intense stress-related issues and challenges with managing her well-being. Yet, her resilience remained undeniable. With remarkable strength, Shasta gradually reclaimed her life, eventually becoming an advocate for survivors of trauma. Her journey illustrates the extraordinary courage required not only to survive such unimaginable circumstances, but also to move forward with hope and purpose. The tragedy that unfolded in Coeur d'Alene underscores critical systemic failures in the criminal justice and monitoring systems. From inadequate parole oversight to fragmented interstate communication, authorities repeatedly overlooked clear warning signs and failed to adequately track Joseph Duncan's movements and actions. These glaring gaps left vulnerable communities exposed and unprotected. Moving forward, improvements in monitoring high-risk offenders must become a priority. Enhanced inter-agency communication and integrated data systems are essential to preventing similar tragedies. Authorities must establish clearer protocols for sharing information across jurisdictions and invest in comprehensive tracking systems for known predators. Public vigilance and awareness are also crucial components of community safety, as demonstrated by the sharp eyes and brave actions of citizens in the Denny's restaurant. Ordinary individuals play an invaluable role in crime prevention and intervention. Encouraging public education and awareness about recognizing and reporting suspicious activities can create powerful barriers against criminal threats. In the face of unimaginable horror and systemic failures, Shasta Groene's remarkable resilience stands as an inspiring example of human strength and courage. Shasta's story should inspire action, awareness, and a commitment to ensuring such tragedies are never repeated. Every crime has a story. Every story has a lesson.